Have you ever wondered what the government really hides beneath the quiet coastlines of Maine? Why certain valleys are marked restricted zone on every map since the 1950s? And why locals in Mount Harrow still refuse to fish near the old cliffs at night, saying the mountain there sometimes breathes? It began in the summer of 1955. The Korean War had ended, but the U.S. Navy was preparing for something colder, quieter, and far more secret. Deep under the granite ridges of Maine's northeastern shoreline, military engineers broke ground for Facility ECHO-12, a classified project disguised as coastal defense research. Only a handful of officers knew its true purpose: to create an underground dock where nuclear submarines could disappear from every radar on Earth. The first convoys arrived without insignia, trucks with welded covers, men without name tags, crates labeled only instrumentation. Local workers were told it was a flood control system, but soon, dynamite shook the cliffs day and night, carving a vast wound into the mountain. By September, geologists started filing quiet reports about something wrong beneath Mount Harrow. Their instruments jammed for no reason. Compasses spun in place. Magnetic readings fluctuated like heartbeats. One technician, a young man from Vermont, wrote in his notebook, "The sensors pick up a pulse. One every 13 seconds. It's not mechanical." The warning reached Washington. The reply came in 2 sentences. "Proceed as planned. No further geological assessments required." That winter, fog blanketed the coast for weeks. Workers complained of headaches, nausea, and a low vibration in the rock that never seemed to stop. Equipment failed. Floodlights burst with no power surges recorded. A steel drill bit melted after striking something softer than stone. The project doctor called it exhaustion. The foreman called it hysteria. But by Christmas, 2 miners had vanished inside the lowest borehole. The Navy sealed off the tunnel and erased their names from payroll lists. A month later, the site commander, Captain William Harland, wrote a personal memo never meant for public view. Night watch reports rhythmic sounds from deep chambers. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats again. Feels like breathing through the rock. Men refused to stay alone after midnight. Still, the construction continued. The war machine never stops for fear. By May 1956, a channel large enough for submarines cut through the mountain straight to the Atlantic. The facility could withstand a direct bomb strike, they said. The base was self-contained, fuel, medical units, command rooms, all hidden beneath 600 feet of granite. On June 14th, the last floodgate was installed. The engineers gathered at the upper shaft, cold sea air blowing through the ventilation tunnels. As power came online, a deep metallic rumble echoed through the mountain. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Captain Harland looked down the corridor, the sound of water rolling through unseen chambers, and whispered to no one in particular, "It's alive." That night, Facility ECHO-12 officially entered the Navy's registry as operational. And somewhere below, under miles of stone and steel, the mountain kept humming. What do you hear when the ocean is completely still? Not the crash of waves or the wind through the rigging, but something deeper. A vibration too low to be sound, too steady to be imagined. That's what the crew of Facility ECHO-12 began to hear once the base came alive. By the spring of 1956, the underground complex was fully operational, a hidden city carved into stone. There were submarine docks big enough to swallow an entire fleet, armament depots sealed behind steel vaults, a small hospital, and endless control corridors lit by humming fluorescent tubes. On paper, everything functioned perfectly. In reality, something beneath the mountain had begun to whisper. Started small. A mechanic reported footsteps in the flooded section when he was alone. A nurse from the infirmary claimed she heard a woman sobbing through the air vents. Then came the banging, slow, deliberate metallic from the sealed maintenance shafts. Sound traveled strangely inside ECHO-12. You could hear your own voice bounce back from directions where no walls existed. Lieutenant Mark Latham, head of the technical division, was ordered to document the growing complaints. In his notes, still classified for decades, he wrote, "Personnel report auditory illusions. Patterns repeat nightly. Voices appear behind bulkheads, yet no source is found. Distress increases in lower sectors." On March 2nd, a young seaman named Douglas Reed was stationed near Floodgate 3 during a night watch. He radioed in a single line before the signal went dead. "There's someone down here." When they found him an hour later, he was crouched against the wall, eyes open, unblinking. He kept whispering, "It had no face." Doctors from the surface hospital diagnosed acute psychotic dissociation. Reed was airlifted out and never returned. Another sailor, trying to reassure the rest, joked that maybe Reed had seen his own reflection in the water. 2 weeks later, that same sailor was found unconscious near the same sluice gate, fingernails torn and lips blue from shock. Officially, both incidents were written off as exhaustion from prolonged duty. Unofficially, Lieutenant Latham sent an encrypted message to the Naval Medical Bureau. "Recommend psychological evaluation of entire unit. Something is influencing perception." The request was denied. The nights grew longer inside ECHO-12. Men stopped whistling on duty. Radios began to catch faint frequencies, soft tapping that resembled Morse code but translated to nothing. During one storm in April, radar operators detected an unidentified underwater echo roughly 300 yards off the main inlet. It was cylindrical, 90 feet long, descending straight down. Not drifting with the current, not following gravity, just sinking vertically into solid rock. The next morning, the sonar logs were missing. The entire night's recording reel had been pulled. Its magnetic tape burned to ash inside the communications room. No one confessed. Captain Harland issued a statement to his officers. No further discussion of unverified phenomena. Focus on duty. But by then, discipline had already cracked. Men refused to go on solo patrols. The ventilation system carried laughter through the sleeping quarters, high, thin, and unmistakably that of a child. At 2:17 a.m., every light on the lower level flickered out for exactly 7 seconds. When they came back, a single line had appeared on the main control screen. Words typed by no operator. "Who's there?" No one ever found out who asked the question first or who answered. How deep does a mountain have to breathe before someone calls it alive? And when cold air starts spilling from solid rock, do you seal it or listen to what it's trying to say? By the winter of 1958, ECHO-12 had become a fully isolated world. 5 levels underground, 600 feet of granite above, and 1,000 tons of Atlantic pressure pressing against its floodgates. The Navy called it the most secure facility on the eastern seaboard. But security meant nothing the day the wall in Section B3 began to move. It started as a thin fracture near the drainage pumps, no longer than a handspan. A maintenance worker noticed a faint stream of vapor drifting from it, cold vapor, the kind that rolls over dry ice. The thermometer read 41 degrees Fahrenheit, 3 degrees below the ambient temperature. Within hours, the chill spread along the wall like frost forming under skin. Teams were ordered to patch it immediately. They scraped the area, drilled anchors, prepared to pour industrial sealant, and then every drill in the chamber shut off at once. No power surge, no tripped breakers. The tools simply died in their operators' hands. Engineer reports mention a soft rustling behind the concrete, as if something large was shifting deeper inside the mountain. One man described it as claws on metal. Another swore he heard breathing. When the crew fled the sector, they found that their flashlights refused to turn off until they reached the elevator, as if power was leaking out of the rock itself. By morning, the temperature drop registered across the entire lower complex. Ventilation fans jammed. Steel beams began to sweat. Captain Harland demanded a full shutdown, but orders from Washington arrived first. Field inspection team en route. Maintain operational status. 3 days later, the delegation arrived, 5 men in crisp uniforms, led by Colonel Arthur Phelps of Naval Intelligence. They spent 5 hours in Section B3, running cables into the crack, taking photographs, and asking questions no one understood. When they left, the corridor was sealed with a temporary steel plate, welded over in silence. That night, the base went dark. Every generator tripped, communications blacked out, and the air filled with a low-frequency hum that made the walls tremble. It lasted 12 minutes. When the lights returned, the plate over B3 was warped outward, not inward, as if pressure had come from the other side. Within a week, the inspection team was gone. Their aircraft departed from the private strip at dawn. No manifest filed. Immediately afterward, ECHO-12 was placed under a scheduled maintenance lockdown for 21 days. All external lines were cut. Supply shipments halted. No one spoke of why. Yet people in the town below noticed movement on the cliffs. Trucks without license plates rolled through Port Harrow after midnight, covered in tarps. Locals heard engines grinding in the fog and saw blue-white flashes deep within the mountain's tunnel mouths. Welding arcs or something stranger. Then came the light. Fishermen miles offshore swore the sea beneath the cliffs began to glow. A murky, phosphorescent green, pulsing slowly, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. It rose from the water, spread in a circle, and faded as dawn broke. By sunrise, Navy patrols were sweeping the coastline, telling everyone it had been a test of underwater flares. But no one had fired anything that night. And when the tide rolled out the next morning, the sand below Mount Harrow was cold enough to burn. What if a voice called you from beneath the ocean floor? Would you answer it, or pray it wasn't meant for you? May 19, 1961. The clocks inside ECHO-12 read 3 o'clock when engineer David Laston left the control post. His assignment was routine: inspect the malfunctioning hydraulic lock at Floodgate 6. The security cameras tracked his progress down the main corridor, then caught the emergency hatch opening in Sector D2. After that, nothing. No return. No alarm. No trace. The hatch he used had been welded shut 4 years earlier. Search teams combed every tunnel for 12 hours. The only thing they found was Laston's flashlight floating in the sump pool. Still on, battery full. The official report called it an accidental drowning, though there was no water in the corridor. 3 weeks later, during a midnight watch, the communications room caught an unauthorized frequency. Faint, rhythmic, shortwave. At first, the operators thought it was interference from Soviet trawlers. But the signal was coming from below, not from the sea. Its coordinates placed it somewhere beneath the foundation of ECHO-12, almost 200 feet deeper than any known chamber. The pattern was simple: 4-8-1-2, pause, for -8-1-2, every 7 seconds. Technician Thomas Brigg, the senior radio officer, stayed after his shift to analyze it. He slowed the playback, filtered the static, and turned pale. He swore he heard a whisper buried in the noise. "I see through the concrete." The next day, Brigg's superiors declared him mentally fatigued and transferred him to medical leave. Within a week, the tape of the signal vanished from the archive. But the pattern didn't stop. Every year since, on the same night, May 19th, exactly at 3 o'clock, the static returns. Always the same frequency, always the same rhythm. And deep inside the concrete, if you stand in silence, you can feel a vibration. 4 beats, pause, 8 beats, 1, 2. The pulse of something that never left. They said it like a joke at first. Don't look into the water. But no one laughed for long. By 1963, ECHO-12 had gone from classified to cursed. Reports of breakdowns, insomnia, and unexplainable panic attacks filled every weekly log. The Surface Command stopped investigating. They simply rotated the crews faster, hoping fresh minds would survive what the older ones could not. Then came USS Garland, the Navy's newest nuclear submarine. Arriving for a 2-week dock inspection, the vessel entered the underground bay without incident, or so everyone thought. Within 48 hours, 3 sailors were dead. One hanged himself in the machine corridor. Another stepped into the drainage canal during night watch. The third was found sitting motionless in his bunk, eyes open, pupils burned gray, as if he'd stared straight into a welding torch. No external injuries, no toxins, just shock. For 2 days afterward, the water in the bay turned cloudy. Dense, oily, opaque, though the filtration system ran flawlessly. The smell was metallic, like blood and salt. Every attempt to drain the sluice failed. The pumps jammed without cause. Lieutenant Mark Latham, still assigned to technical oversight, wrote in his final memo, "No light reflects off the surface. It's like looking into a mirror that doesn't recognize you." He requested reassignment 3 days later and was denied. On shore, the lighthouse keeper at Mount Harrow, a veteran named Edward Marr, recorded a strange entry in his weather log that same week. At 2 o'clock hours, the sea was glowing red from beneath, not crimson like fire, deeper, slower, like something breathing under glass. Even the gulls went silent. The Navy confiscated his logbook the next morning. Marr resigned before sunset. Inside the base, morale collapsed. Men slept in shifts with lights on. The phrase, "Don't look into the water," became an unwritten rule. A superstition whispered between decks. But the scientists didn't listen. In 1965, a team from the Naval Research Bureau arrived under orders to investigate recurring electromagnetic disturbances. They drilled into the sealed wall of Sector D2, right above the area where engineer David Laston had disappeared 4 years earlier. The instruments spiked immediately, high-frequency bursts, untraceable but rhythmic. One of the physicists described it as something inside trying to sync with us. That same night, at precisely 3:17 a.m., every lamp in the facility flickered 3 times, paused, then stabilized. From then on, it happened every night. Same time, same sequence. The phenomenon lasted for nearly 2 years. The maintenance crews timed it to the second, 3:17. A tremor, a flash, a single ripple of light down the flooded corridor. A classified summary filed to Washington contained just one line beneath the analysis. Possible resonance with unknown source. And beneath that, handwritten in pencil, almost erased, "If it's resonance, it means something's responding." By 1970, the mountain had gone quiet, too quiet. No more whispers through the vents. No new disappearances. No reports of glowing water. To the Navy, silence meant stability. To those who lived inside ECHO-12, it meant the thing beneath them was listening. That was the year a small team of civilian consultants arrived, unannounced and unwelcomed. For men, no uniforms, no insignia. Each carried a black case stamped with the letters P.O. Their official paperwork described them as geophysical survey specialists from the Department of Energy. But the file headers carried a different classification. Project Oracle, Psychotronic Interference Division. Colonel James Carr, the new commanding officer, had never heard of such a division. When he called Washington for confirmation, The line went dead halfway through his inquiry. Within the hour, the 4 civilians were already deep inside the lower tunnels, level 5, an area closed since the D2 drilling incident. They carried no lights besides headlamps, no guards, no radio contact. The blast door sealed behind them at 2100 hours. 24 hours later, the door opened again. All 4 men stepped out, pale, silent, covered in a thin layer of dust as if they'd walked through centuries. Their eyes avoided everyone. They spoke to no one. They simply handed Colonel Carr a roll of diagrams sealed in wax, requested immediate departure clearance, and left aboard an unmarked helicopter before dawn. Carr later wrote in his personal file, "Whatever they found, they didn't want to name it." One of them kept his hand on the wall the entire walk back, like he was afraid it would stop breathing. The following week, the temperature in the lower shafts dropped again, the same pattern as 1958. Sensors detected faint electrical interference, like Morse signals echoing through the rock. This time, however, the rhythm matched human speech, short bursts, long pauses, repeating 3 phrases according to the translation algorithm: open, hear, and remember. Then one of Carr's maintenance technicians vanished. His name was Michael Darren, 28, responsible for power grid calibration in Section C. Security footage showed him entering the freight elevator at 2:11 a.m. The doors never reopened. 2 days later, his notebook was found on the floor near the generator room. Most pages were soaked with condensation, words blurred beyond recognition. Only one sentence was still legible, pressed deep into the paper as if written in panic. "There's something beneath us, and it's learning." Colonel Carr ordered all sublevel access restricted, citing structural instability. He sealed the notebook inside a classified archive box and requested a full evacuation review. Washington never replied. Instead, a new order arrived in red ink: maintain operation readiness, continue observation, no further contact with Oracle personnel required. That night, the ventilation ducts began to hum again, faint, deliberate, like breathing. Only this time it wasn't from the mountain. It came from the concrete itself. There are 2 kinds of silence: the kind that comforts you and the kind that listens back. By 1974, ECHO-12 had entered what official documents called a stabilization phase. Unofficially, it was a lockdown born of fear. Entire sectors D2, B3, and the lower maintenance levels were sealed under heavy welds. No one was allowed below level 3 without written clearance from Washington. The corridors above were half empty, the canteen nearly deserted, the air always colder than it should have been. The Navy replaced Colonel Carr with Commander Philip Moss, a strict, silent man whose orders were simple: keep the base functional, keep the noise quiet. He forbade discussion of Project Oracle, though the name lingered in whispers. Men said the diagrams Carr received years earlier were still locked in his old office, and that sometimes, even with the power off, they glowed faintly under the desk lamp. Then the clocks began to slip. An electrician named Nate Holloway noticed first. Every instrument in his section, wall clocks, panel timers, even wristwatches, lagged exactly 27 minutes behind the rest of the base. When he tried to reset them, the hands resisted, ticking backward for several seconds before freezing. He logged the anomaly, powered down his panel, and reached to disconnect a dead transformer. The surge burned through his gloves. His palms blistered instantly, though the unit hadn't carried current for months. Medical notes filed afterward described the wound as localized microwave tissue damage. When Commander Moss asked the base physicist for explanation, the reply was chillingly simple. It's not electricity. The object resonates with an unknown frequency. Recommendation: observation only. Object: No one dared specify what that meant anymore. After the incident, small rituals began to appear around the facility. First, a strip of copper nailed above a hatch door. Then 2 bent nails crossed on a locker. Eventually, nearly every compartment bore a tiny handmade cross, pressed from scrap metal and welded just high enough to catch the light. No one admitted to placing them. No one removed them either. When inspectors from the mainland arrived that autumn, they found a base strangely immaculate yet utterly lifeless. The only sound was the echo of their own boots and the slow, uneven pulse of the ventilation system. Commander Moss maintained a perfect smile during their tour, but in his private notes that night he wrote, "The air moves differently now. You can feel pressure shifting between walls like breath under skin." He proposed complete deactivation of the lower reactors. The request was denied with a single phrase from Navy Command: "Maintain containment. No physical interference." In the weeks that followed, the humming returned, faint at first, then rhythmic. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats again. The same pulse they'd recorded 19 years earlier, now vibrating through the pipes, soft as a heartbeat behind concrete ribs. No alarms, no panic, just the mountain, alive again in the dark. And those who still served within ECHO-12 learned to stop talking, stop asking, and listen carefully, because sometimes the walls exhaled. Storms were common along the Maine coast, but that night the sea didn't roar. It groaned. Waves struck the cliffs below ECHO-12 with the rhythm of a heartbeat, while inside the mountain every light flickered as if the sky itself were breathing through the cables. At 23:47 hours, the facility suffered a total energy failure. Backup generators refused to engage. The emergency lights blinked once, and the base fell into complete darkness. Commander Philip Moss ordered manual restart protocol. 2 technicians, Leon Burke and Samuel Wyatt, descended to the power sector on level 2. Their last transmission came 5 minutes later. "We're at the panel, standing by." Then silence. When the lights returned 21 minutes later, both men were found sitting upright on the floor near the generator console. Faces frozen in expressions of terror, eyes wide, mouths open as if screaming. No burns, no trauma, no gas traces. Their hearts had simply stopped at the same second. The official report labeled it a possible gas leak, though environmental scans showed no toxins or pressure changes. Commander Moss sent the bodies to the mainland morgue. The death certificates arrived back-stamped, classified medical anomaly. For the next 7 days, the base operated under emergency code. The humming grew louder, constant, rising through the air shafts until sleep became impossible. Guards reported seeing movement in the corridor mirrors, a shadow stepping out of view whenever they turned. On the 8th night, during another storm, a patrolman named Elias Ford failed to report for shift change. He was found an hour later in the access tunnel outside reactor chamber 3, or rather what was left of him. His torso had been torn cleanly in 2, no blood spread, no defensive wounds. The metallic floor beneath him bore a trail of bare footprints, small, almost childlike, yet each with 6 toes. The prints led toward the sealed bulkhead of Sector B3. They stopped at the door, then vanished. Security sealed the corridor. Moss demanded full investigation, but Washington intervened before he could file his report. Within 24 hours, a Pentagon commission arrived. 3 men in gray coats, escorted by armed MPs. They spoke to no one, took samples from the hull of a docked submarine, and removed a scorched panel from the inner bay wall. When asked what they were looking for, the lead investigator simply replied, "Residual structure, not human." Their final document, now partially declassified, introduced a phrase never used before in naval science: non-human structural imprint. After their departure, the storm subsided, but the smell of the sea changed. It no longer smelled of salt and rust. It smelled of iron, oil, and something faintly sweet, like decay in water. The next morning, a mechanic noticed the small metal cross above the Sector B3 entrance had melted. No one touched it again, and deep inside the mountain, the ventilation stopped for 3 full minutes, as though the entire facility was holding its breath. By the early 90s, the Cold War was ending, and with it, so were the secrets that had lived too long beneath the earth. On paper, Facility ECHO-12 no longer served any strategic purpose. The Navy called it obsolete infrastructure. To the few who still remembered its sound, it was something else entirely, a wound that never healed. The last crew arrived in the spring of 1992 to dismantle what was left. Remove the electrical grid, drain the docks, cut the steel veins that ran through the mountain's heart. The official directive read, decommissioning for structural safety. But the first week of work revealed something no one expected. Behind a corroded concrete wall in Sector F, welders found a hollow echo, the unmistakable sound of open space where solid rock should have been. They broke through, expecting an old maintenance shaft. Instead, the torchlight revealed a narrow tunnel descending at a sharp angle, walls raw and uneven, carved not by drills but by something older, smoother. There were no markings, no pipes, no cables, and no record of its existence on any blueprint. The site commander, Major Harlan Reeves, ordered an immediate survey. 3 soldiers volunteered to go down, a routine inspection, nothing more. They entered the tunnel at 1410 hours. Radio contact lasted 13 minutes. The final transmission came through as a burst of static, followed by a voice barely above a whisper. Stop! It's behind the... Then silence. A full search was launched. The men were gone. Their tethers ended abruptly at a smooth section of wall, as though the stone itself had flowed shut behind them. The tunnel's temperature had dropped to 34 degrees. The air smelled of rust and seawater. Reeves reported the event to Washington. The response was immediate and absolute. Seal the passage. Do not attempt recovery. Within 48 hours, construction crews welded the entire shaft with 3 layers of steel, poured reinforced concrete over it, and marked the section as permanently restricted. The new log entry simply read, anomaly contained. No further excavation authorized. ECHO-12 was officially decommissioned 2 months later. Power was cut, the docks flooded, the surface entrance buried under gravel and rebar. Every remaining document was classified for 50 years. Personnel were reassigned, records erased, families compensated for hazardous duty exposure. Only one piece of testimony ever escaped the blackout. It came from an engineer named Paul Darren, who oversaw the flooding of the lower levels. His handwritten note, found years later in an auction storage box, read, "We poured 20 tons of water into the lower ring. It didn't rise. It didn't drain. It just disappeared. The mountain swallowed it. No one could explain where the water went. Some said it seeped into hidden caverns. Others believed it was absorbed, pulled down into whatever lay beneath that sealed corridor. When the last crew left, the base was silent again. But as the helicopter lifted off the cliffside, several men swore they saw ripples spreading across the concrete roof, as if something far below had moved. They call it a museum now. Guided tours, souvenir mugs, dim lights lining the tunnels where soldiers once vanished. Children laugh at the echo when they clap their hands. The guides joke, "That's why we call it the breathing mountain." But the locals don't laugh. In the 2020s, ECHO-12 became a tourist curiosity, another Cold War relic polished for the internet. The surface buildings were restored, the lowest levels sealed off for safety reasons. Visitors are told stories about classified submarines, secret tests, and Cold War paranoia. None of the guides mention the disappearances. None of them stay after dark. The fishermen of Port Harrow still refuse to sail near the cliffs at night. They say the sea hums when the wind dies, a low mechanical vibration, like turbines turning miles below. On calm nights, it spreads across the bay, steady as a heartbeat. Then, one morning, after a week of storms, something washed ashore. An old submarine, paint stripped, hull eaten by salt. No identification numbers, no flag. The Coast Guard towed it to the dock near the museum. The hatch was open. Inside, no crew, no logs, only a trail of wet bare footprints leading down the corridor to the command room. On the wall, carved deep into rusted metal with something sharp, they found 5 words. "We never left." The submarine was gone the next day, moved, confiscated, or reclaimed. No one knows. The Navy issued no statement. But that week, the museum's night cameras began recording strange sounds from the sealed lower sectors. Faint bursts of static, followed by rhythmic pulses. For beats, pause, 8, 1, 2. Then silence. Until the very end of the recording, a low, drawn-out sound, rising from deep beneath the concrete. Not a vibration, not machinery, a breath. And if you listen closely, between the pulses, you can still hear the whisper. "I see through the concrete."